welcome to Timberborn and the settlement of the Skyborn. My name is Zedek and we are playing Update 7 with fast transportation, 3D dirt, and all sorts of new features. If you're new to this playthrough, I'm trying to use all those features to make a skyscraper city. And at this point, we're pretty far into the process. You can see that we've got our food towers and our tree towers going, we've got some big storage set up, our power plant, and most recently, last episode, I made this giant tower in the middle of the map to collect a ton of water. And this episode, I really want to start turning my attention to food production. You can see with our stacked farming here, we've got a lot of good raw food coming in, but we're not actually processing it into a form that a lot of the Ironteeth can eat. And that's going to be important because I really want to start boosting up my population because I've got over 98 job vacancies right now. So a lot of this colony really isn't working as effective as it could be. And really, I think food is the last thing holding me back to starting to just crank up the population. And again, if you're new to this playthrough, you can see that I've more or less divided this map into 4 quadrants. I've got industrial zone in the top right, kind of agricultural modern city in the upper right, what will be a hive city of chaos in the bottom left, and I don't know, city park down in the bottom right here. As for where to put our food processing, I'm thinking up here would be an ideal area. We're close to our food as well as our storage, as well as potentially some water if that's going to go into it, which means that a lot of this can go. You can see I do have some traffic in here for tubeways and some trees, but all of this at this point is redundant. I've got this all built up elsewhere, so I don't really need it here anymore. So let's just go ahead and delete a lot of this just to get some space back. You can see that there's been a lot of organic growth to this city as it's been built up. As we're going, I really want to start cleaning this up and making it a little bit more orderly, which I'm doing piecemeal as I build each of these new towers. For the new buildings, I'm also trying to adhere them to a central grid system. So you can see that I've got these platforms in here with water underneath. And the idea is that this is going to be our main roads going through. And I can use that to actually irrigate everything at the same time. And to that end, I think we can go ahead and continue this process. If I run through here to take some water, I should be able to get most of this irrigated. And I think we can also continue flattening some of this space up here so I can get some land back. And this is going to let us set up the foundation for this next building. Now, as I'm tearing out all this stuff, I don't really need to worry too much about the lost food. And that's thanks to all our new food towers that we've made in the last couple of episodes. And filling in the space that we've just made with platforms should let us get some temporary roads back in place. With all that taken care of, we should now have a pretty nice spot to build with. There is just one catch. You know, if I'm going to be building a bunch of food factory elements here, a lot of those are going to require power. You know, just taking a look at the fermenter, the oil press, everything except for the hydroponic garden is going to require power in some way. Now, the good news is we've got a giant power plant right over here on this side of the map. The bad news is we don't have power access over here. But I've got a trick up my sleeve. You see, one of the reasons I'm making these boulevards platform is, 1, so I can have water under there, but 2, so I also have the option of putting in power lines. And I'm going to take advantage of one of the new features in this update, because now power shafts are just a single omnidirectional block. And when I place this, it will connect in as many ways as I need it to, which makes stuff like this a lot less tedious than it used to be. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to run all these power lines all the way underneath the street. And that's going to give me options to connect to it in different ways. Now, we're going to have to figure out how to get this line connected to the power plant over here. Now, thankfully, I've already got this power shaft right here. This may not be the long-term answer for us, but we should be able to tap into it, I think, without too much difficulty. I'm a big fan of that change of just having a single block for power. I mean, it's going to make, especially in my case, working with power in 3 dimensions so much easier. And personally, I feel like that just removed a tedious part of the game. And in short order, it looks like we've got everything connected. I'm also noticing this new highlighting don't remember seeing last time I booted the game up. So you can see when I'm clicking on anything in a power network, I'm noticing that it highlights everything connected in that grid in a blue color. For example, if I click over on this compact water wheel, you can see everything in the power plant is highlighted, except for this wheel, which highlights that it's not connected to the grid. But you can see everything in here is all nice and highlighted. But if I go over here to this engine, you'll notice that it is in a different grid. So that is really handy. It lets you know very quickly if something is disconnected. That said, let's get back to what our mission was for this episode, getting a food factory going. Now for food, we've got a lot of different parts to work with. We're going to want fermenters, oil presses, hydroponics farms, food factories, and finally brewers for coffee. The Ironteeth really do have a lot of buildings involved with food. Let's take a peek at these height-wise, see how much clearance they need. I have a feeling that the food factory is going to be the highest one, but it looks like we can get away with 3 clearance. And hopefully that's going to be enough for any of these buildings. Yes, that does look to be the case. That's a good sign. That means we could use that as a foundation for making floors in a skyscraper. And then we can also use the pattern we've been using currently, which is using an elevator shaft to get to the floors very easily. Now to actually design this building. So what I'm potentially thinking of is something like what we did for our tree farm. You can see here I've got like a central elevator shaft and 2 wings to the building. I'd like to do something similar here. I'm thinking some elevator shaft right in the middle here. That way I could provide maybe easy access and maybe a 2-way that cuts across to this storage facility. And then maybe 2 tall narrow towers on each side dedicated to some food production. That said, let's figure out the elevator shaft to begin with. I'm thinking this will be the entryway into the building, and this is going to be stacked up vertically, like so. And I've got this jagged, but you're going to see what I have in mind for this in a moment. Now what we can do is we can stack each of these up like that. And what I'm imagining is that one of these sides over here is going to be the 2-way station to connect to each of the floors. And the other side, just to make it look symmetrical, we could put our power shaft in there. This is going to allow us to get power to each of the wings. From here, I think it's just a matter of repeating that process for as many floors that we want. So let's start with those floors to begin with. And before I forget, I actually do need a nice way to get power over there. So if this is where we're going to get our power right here to line up with that 2-way, I think I could just run some of that underground. Elevator shaft figured out. Let's figure out what we're going to do for the floors. I wanted to do something where I have both the input and output of the building right like adjacent to the production line. So roughly what I was thinking is something like this. Imagine that each of the floors goes up a layer. On one side, just like I showed earlier, I could have our production facilities, say, lined up like this. And on the other side, I can have the output of whatever this building happens to be stacked over here. And I should have enough space in here that I could stack in the inputs for whatever these buildings need over into this row here. And then that would give me just enough space for whatever road I need. This doesn't line up just right, but what I could do is I want to get this road right here lined up with this road right here. So maybe I could just have a bridge connecting each wing of the building to this tower. And now if I look at this, I should then be able to just stack this or continue to stack this up for whatever the next layer is. And then I can put whatever my new food buildings are. And then from the distance, I should be able to peek and see how our production is for each floor. It's not super space efficient, but I like the idea of just these 2 very tall, narrow buildings with production in them. So first step for me is to try to line this stuff up. I think I need to shift this at least 2 blocks down. And to make things look pretty, I think for the ground floor, I'm going to try to make a little bit of an arch pattern. The idea that I can keep the bottom floor just like a garden, so the entire building is suspended on top of things. So let's try this. Let's see if I manage to get this lined up just the way it needs to be. Oh, okay, here's a flaw in my design. I wanted to have this suspension bridge that would connect both sides. But when I do that, I can't put platforms on top of the foundation of this bridge. A little annoying, but I think we can just get around that by having the bridge start offset like that. In fact, for the first floor, I could even get tricky and use, I think, dirt overhanging right here just to support that. First floor looks a little bit funky the way things are set up. I wonder if just for the first floor, will dirt let me overhang enough to be able to make what I need? Yeah, I don't mind that. This could just be our foundation floor, and then everything after this is going to then switch over to metal platforms. It's a little different, but I don't mind it. Let's see what the beavers make of this. I have a feeling they're going to be able to build this foundation no problem, but as we get up here, the build order of this dirt is probably going to be a little bit tricky for them. While they start looking at that, though, I'm going to just replicate this foundation over on the other side. And that should do it for now. I have a feeling we're also going to run into trouble building these elevator stations, since I don't think they can build all the foundations just from that tubeway. I think we're going to have to plan on some scaffolding. We do have access over here. That might be a really cheap way to bootstrap this construction. If I just had beavers hang off over the edge here, yeah, I think that will do it. Take advantage of what we've already got built. Not the prettiest setup in the world, but it will do. And if I'm looking at our stockpile, we're doing pretty good here. I think the only thing that we're short on is pine resin. That's partially to do with earlier this episode, a couple episodes ago, where I tore down our entire pine production to make way for this mega tower. But I did move some pine production over into our tree forest over here, which I can't remember. I might have done that off camera. But if I peek down at the very bottom floor, you'll notice I've got pines hidden inside our production area. And I've got some tappers here, with unfortunately no workers, which is what we're trying to solve with this episode. Now, taking a peek at our work here. Okay, these overhangs, unfortunately, I just realized they're a little bit too short to be useful. I think I'm going to have to build them just ever so slightly longer. You know, maybe what I can do just to slightly speed up some of this production is to haul in some resources. We can just haul in a couple of planks and steel. I think will go a long way. All that prep work done, the foundation should now go in pretty quick. Okay, we've got our foundation done. Now, for what to start with, I think ideally I want some food factories. That would let me get rid of these ones down here and maybe start processing eggplants. Problem is, I know they're also going to require oil. So maybe we should start with oil to begin with. And while I'm placing down this oil, I'm struck by another idea. I know that I'm going to have a decent number of beavers who are working running here to get food. So having part of this tower connected to our main transportation grid would be ideal. That way, if somebody's coming from home, they could run in real quick into the particular floor they want and then leave. And as it is right now, they'd have to probably enter one of these nearby stations and then walk over. So not ideal. I wonder if I could take advantage of the fact that these buildings are relatively small to make a bypass for this two-way to cut over to our main freeway over here. Yeah, let's do that. These buildings especially are relatively tiny, so they don't matter a whole lot. If I were to say run this two-way like this in the back, then I could re-add the oil presses here, here, and here. And now we just need to figure out how to connect all of these together. Well, the easiest way is a little bit disruptive, but what I could do is just run them right through here. Yeah, that will work pretty well. Then I just need to figure out a way to get this connected up here with another bypass, which shouldn't be too bad. Perfect. And while I'm at it, the other thing I need to figure out is how to connect each of these to power. So as we mentioned earlier, I've got this power shaft that is connecting each of our two-way stations. So I just need a way to get this power branched off to the floors. I could probably repeat the exact same thing I did for the two-way here, just by building a little offshoot here and then running the power right through it. And if I click on those, they are all blue, showing they are all connected to the power grid. while they work on getting that power run over, let's see what these buildings need. So all of them need canola seeds and they produce oil. Well, we're going to stockpile a ton of oil because what I'm thinking of doing is just spamming 2 large things here, and then we'll just cart in the canola seeds as intermediate input. So if I have haulers keep these little ones populated, that should be more than enough. In fact, it's probably overkill for me to have 2 per factory, but whatever, we'll just have extra space. And I'm going to configure each of these. So I want these canola seeds to be demand, so haulers are pulling them in, and I'm going to do the reverse for the oil. These are supply, so if I ever need oil somewhere else, they will be carted through here. And just to be sure, let me find one of our storage over here that has a bunch of canola seeds, and I'll make sure that it's set to supply, that we can make sure that stuff works its way over to us. Now, unfortunately, I don't have enough population to get all of these running, but what I'm going to do is maybe make one of them a higher priority than the rest, make sure I have somebody working here that can just kind of kickstart things. Next up, let's continue building these towers. I want to get more food production in here. So I'm thinking now that we've got oil, we should probably do fermenters or food factories. You know, of the two, let's do food factories first. Now, at this point, I'm also going to start switching over from dirt over to regular scaffolding. To do that, I'm just going to put some of those platforms there in the middle, and I think I just need these overhangs like so. That should do the trick. Oh, and I'm just realizing I've got a flaw in my design here. So you can see I was intending to repeat this process of having the bridges overhang again. But again, I overlooked that I can't build platforms on top of this edge of the bridge. Well, that's okay. I've got a solution for this that's going to temporarily strand some of these beavers. So let's see, I need those guys to get out of there. And we're going to delete these. We're going to dynamite these 2 blocks right here. And what I'm going to do is just take that dirt, move it down 1 little layer, and then I'm going to switch to having regular platforms through here. And I think I'm going to have to do the same thing every layer going up now. I always find that with every design you need at least a few tweaks. It never quite works out the way you expect in the beginning. While the beavers are busy building those platforms, let's at least lay out these factories. So I'm thinking we're going to put at least 4 food factories here. And one of the things I like with this design is I'm not limited in the future if I need to add more factories. I should be able to just spawn another floor and then put them in. Let's do a mixture of corn rations on one side as well as eggplants on the other. That's going to allow me to decommission my existing food factories that I've got. Algae rations, I'm going to hold off on those. I'm going to put those on another floor because we're not producing algae anyways. And corn rations I think are relatively easy. If I remember from our existing food factory, they just require logs and corn. So I can just ship those in here. One problem I am noticing with a vertical build is it gets very confusing to know what it is you're doing. Especially when I'm holding up these overlays, they just disguise everything else below them. I mean, look at my storage tower there. That's kind of overkill at this point. Now, eggplant rations I think are a little tricky. If I remember, they require a few other parts. Now, this is something I wish that the game did do, is it won't show me what the ingredients are for this recipe until the building is built. So I have to get a few more planks in here before I can see what an eggplant ration takes. But maybe if we go down here and spy on my existing building, we can see. So logs, eggplants, and oil. So it's a little bit more complicated than corn rations, and it requires oil, which we'll have produced on the floor below us. So I think the only change I'm going to do between this and the prior floor is I'm going to put a couple containers in here to store oil, just to make production a little bit quicker. And before I forget, I'm also going to need to make sure I get power run to these new buildings. And this is revealing a flaw I've got in this design again. So you can see with these buildings like the food factory, I need to get power connected in the middle. You see, if I run a power line like I do on the prior floor, it's not going to connect the way I want it to. It won't accept that power. I've got to get it connected in the middle here. You know, I'm trying to think if there's an easy tweak I can make to this design to fix that. Well, it's a little costly, but there is something we can do. I'm going to move these vertical shafts that you see here and here to the front. And I'm going to move these power lines to the middle. So with that shifted over there, I could then shift over the connections for the elevator shaft over here. And if I re-add those platforms in the middle for power, I think that's going to do the trick again. Just like that. And I think this is still going to be connected to the tube network here. Because if I look at this tube network, it's going to connect to this building here. And that should allow the beavers to transfer to this vertical shaft. So that should still make sure everything is nice and connected. All right, and with all of that set up, I think the only thing I'm going to go back and do is make sure each of these tiny buildings are prioritized by haulers. I want to make sure that they're all always supplied to keep these buildings running. And with that, I think we're ready for the next floor. Now, with this floor, I might have to do something a little bit tricky, because what I want to do is have a quick and easy bypass to our storage tower. Oh. Unfortunately, I'm also noticing another flaw. I thought that I could build platforms on top of these, which apparently I can't do that. Can I build overhangs? Well, we got lucky. That was an easy save. But, as I was saying, one of the things I want to do here for this next floor is have an easy way to get over to our massive storage tower. So you can see right here, I've got this elevator shaft for this building, and this elevator shaft for this building, and the easiest way to connect them right now is to connect all the way back to this freeway, go up a block, and then back over. Given that most of the raw agricultural resources are right up here on this floor, I'm thinking it would make sense to have an easy bypass that just runs right through the center here over to this section. That way the haulers don't have to go so far to fill out these small buildings. Unfortunately, this is a little tricky because of the way I set this up. So I've got two routes I could do. Option one is I could just meander a tube-way through the top of this building, come out the front, and then run over to the other side here. The other option is to bury it underground. I think I could just, this tube-way station is right here. I could use tunnels just to tunnel underneath this entire building and connect over there. Between those options, I don't know. The tunnel would definitely be cleaner. You wouldn't even be able to tell it's there other than this being platforms. That said, I think making an upper layer bypass just looks cooler. So I'm going to go with that. Now, unfortunately, I think that means I'm going to have to, again, tear out some of this stuff. I build something, I tear it down, I build it again. So what I'm thinking I could do is make this complicated little overhang system here to make something that reaches all the way out to the other side like that. Then I can go ahead and rebuild this tube-way station. And from here, that gives me a nice tube-way section over there. Next battle is getting from this point over to something over here without messing up any of this complicated system I've got here. I think what I could do is if I could get something up here, I could run it all the way to the edge there. Let's use that 3D view just to get a little peek of what we've got going on. So if I had a tube-way, say, all the way up to here, maybe another archway set to that way. That gets us almost there. And a final little zigzag here, I think will do the trick. That is a very claustrophobic and roundabout way of connecting this. And I think that's going to work. Yeah, I like that. Feels more like a sky bridge. And I think this shows with this build, like a lot of builds, is you can have an idea of what you want to do, but you just have to keep on iterating. Because there's always complications that come up as you start building. Everything all connected again. Let's continue building the next floor. For this one, I'm thinking it's going to be fermenters. So I'll quickly stamp out some of the supporting platforms again. And unfortunately, I think we're just about at the point where our scaffolding is no longer going to help us. So as soon as they finish building this last elevator station, I'm going to destroy all this scaffolding, and we can add it back in just a second. For the fermenters, these buildings are a little tricky. I could be more efficient with the way I'm going to lay them out, but I think this is good enough. Well, what I'm going to do is just stack them like that. 4 per side. And I'm not worrying about them too much because I know I can always just create more floors to contain more of them. But if I stack them like this and then put some power lines there, that should connect all of them. And that gives me space then over here to have large amounts of storage for whatever it is I'm going to ferment. And now to configure these things. Let's see, what do we have that we can ferment? Well, given that we don't have access to mushrooms yet, let's just do a split. We're going to do one side of these, it could be fermented cassava, and the other side being fermented soybeans. Eventually, we'll get a big supply of mushrooms later, and maybe I'll add like just a set of fermenters just for it. And just like the other floors, I'm going to give the most space to the output product, and then also just small input containers for all the inputs that we need. And again, at this point, it is becoming increasingly difficult to configure all these things. So with the fermenters laid out, I'm just going to jump to the next layer and maybe start working on coffee, and then maybe another set of fermenters for the mushrooms, kind of preemptively for when we've got it available. The good news, though, is that this has more or less become rote. I can stamp out new floors at this point very quickly because we've figured out all the gotchas with the layouts. The only thing holding us back is going to be scaffolding to actually manage to build this, which I think I'm going to have to revisit what we've got over here. Maybe we can build something really quick. Let's try this. I've got this bypass bridge that we made. I can commandeer that for a moment just to make some scaffolding up here. Something like this. In this case, our scaffolding is probably just as expensive as some of our tower. But while they're working on that, we've got the foundation. Let's get our next run of buildings in. So maybe we could put down coffee on one side as well as fermenters on the other. And while we wait for the beavers to catch up with these building plans, I think the next thing I need to figure out is how to get algae and mushrooms grown. So these buildings are grown in a hydroponics buildings. And looking at some calculators online, I think I need quite a few of these to support a large population. So I'm trying to think of a good place to put them. In the past, I have been avoiding creating them because I've been short on water. But as of last episode, I started putting industrial pumping, so I've got as much water as I could possibly need now. I could either stack them into the main food towers, just filling up, rows on their own, or I'm tempted, I may even give them a tower of their own in between both of these. Well, I'm going to try first the layout where I'm putting the hydroponics bays in the actual tower itself. I want these towers to go up to the top of the map anyways, so we'll just do it. If I run out of space, I can create another tower. So first things first, we need to go ahead and pair our next floor, which thankfully at this point I'm getting much faster at doing. But let's see, what can we do to stack a lot of hydroponics farms in here? I know I'm going to have to devise some way to put a staircase in here, which is going to be the trickiest part, I think. And I think I'm just going to mirror that exact same thing on the other side, but this time have it grow algae. And hopefully I'm going to remember what I did well enough to be able to recreate it. And now that we'll have algae mushrooms coming in, I'm just going to put in the final floor to have an algae food factory. I have a feeling we might eventually need more hydroponics gardens, but I still have room for at least 1 or 2 more floors after this, so we can add it if and when we need it. And while I'm at it, I might as well add a few additional food presses in here. In comparison to the hydroponics floors, these floors are definitely easier to work with. And in case I decide to add bots later, I don't know, while we're here, why don't we throw in at least 1 more floor with even more oil presses. I'm going to tear out down the scaffolding after this, and I really don't feel like coming back and building that scaffolding again, so I'm going to take advantage of it being present. And the fact that I now have the entire layout of this thing committed to memory. I have a feeling that when I come back here to build this later, I'm going to easily forget all the things I did. And we're just going to give this a couple of days to be built, and we should have our completed food factory. I'm still leaving myself the option to put a few more hydroponics bays up top, but I think this is going to be it for now. And with all of that complete, I think we can wrap up this build with just a couple of decorations so it doesn't look so bland. For the roof, maybe I'll just make this an upstairs terrace. A little bit of canola planted, surrounding fence, as well as the campfire, I think tidies up the first floor. And that gives us our completed food tower build, which other than our scaffolding is now the tallest building that we've got. I like the fact that from the outside you can just see all the manufacturing buildings stacked up in the back there. The other thing I like with this design is that from the front, I can just glance and see how much food we've got stockpiled. So with that building complete, I think I've got enough food production here that I could support, say, up to 1,000 beavers. But I think I'm gonna wait for another episode to handle that. I'm just gonna do one last thing in this episode, and that's clean up this scaffolding for our tower. I may build more on the tower later, but in the meantime, this scaffolding has been really annoying me because I can't quite see what I'm doing. So I'm gonna just clean some of this stuff up. But with that, I think I'm gonna wrap up this episode. We've got our new food production going in, which is gonna be able to carry us probably for the rest of the game. And I'm looking forward to boosting the population of this game and starting to come up with some more futuristic housing for the beavers. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I hope to catch you next time.